Moses, my ass. What the hell is this? This is on the Sistine Chapel, and believe it or not, it literally looks like somebody's mooning Moses. And there's been a lot of speculation as to how this actually comes about and who is this supposed to be? Who is it that's showing their ass to Moses? And, is it biblical? Is it, what is it here? Let's see. And just scoot over there. You can see there's, that's pretty plain and simple. Here's the dude just flying. He's flying, and he's showing that ass to Moses. Kind of looks like Moses too. Originally, they said that this idea was that this was the Exodus, that this is when he left. So like, really, did he show his ass when he left? I mean, what is this? And of course, he's bent like a letter, if you think of it. And then the sun, of course, is in between them, and Moses is pointing, and then Moses is bent like a letter. Yeah. So I won't go into that because we'll go into portraits and things at a later date. But yeah, this is the famous Sistine Chapel and stuff. And I don't know, if you're a real Bible thumper, you may want to hang around. Don't click off too yet. I don't care who you are. You might want to find out this information. It kind of changes the feeling of things a little bit. And we all like try to find the truth in life and stuff. We want to know the truth of where we all come from. We want to know the truth of reality, you know. And seems like people are really searching for it. Other people kind of have a grasp on it, but reality says that Moses and the Exodus and the stories out of the Bible don't actually show any proof whatsoever of having happened. In fact, they had thousands of Hebrews and Christians comb the desert trying to find shards of pottery, and they actually said that if they just found a couple of shards of pottery that they could date, then they would say the whole thing, that with 600,000 warriors and all the kids and 1.5 million, 2 million people could be just for a few pieces of pottery, and they couldn't find any really. They never found anything substantial enough to even say that someone had even settled in a place for a long period of time. They found lots of small little settlements, and there seems to be a little group that went through there that might have had 3,000 to 4,000 people at one time, but nothing that would totally, be, another idea that someone had too is they said that if they had gone out to the proposed Sinai mount from Egypt with the amount of people, that if they were to go 4 side by side with 3 feet in between them, like almost kicking each other's heels, that by the time that they made it to Sinai, there would still be a large amount of people left in Egypt in that line, and that it would take a long time for this idea that they have even of these people to do it. Like if you were to take ants and have done it like a stream of ants, that it just doesn't come about right. It just doesn't, logistically make any sense whatsoever. And over and above that, they find no proof whatsoever of anybody ever leaving Egypt. And of course, they say, well, that's a cover up, and things. Well, cover up about Exodus and the Red Sea. Let's see if we can find a cover up. Maybe a cover up that's going on for 2,000 years. Here's one of the things I wanted to show you about this. So let's look here. Let's see. If we were to go to the Red Sea crossing, I don't have to go to the actual Bible passage and start showing you this in Hebrew, but if you'd like, you definitely can. But crossing the Red Sea, the crossing of the Red Sea in Hebrew is Kiryat Yansuf. Okay, Yam is the sea, yeah, and it's the sea god of the Canaanites, and whenever they fought the sea, Mot and him fought the sea, that's Yam, and so the sea is at one point a god, but then it's also just the sea. But Suf is reeds, not red, So look at this. Crossing of the Red Sea, or Sea of Reeds. Reeds is part of the biblical narrative of the escape of the Israelites led by Moses from pursuing the Egyptians in the book of Exodus. It's also mentioned in the Quran. It's everybody's big thing. If you think about it, it's the most supernatural thing that God does, is he parts an ocean and lets people go through, right? Okay. Well, whoosh, that's gone. Because the big cover up or veil that we've had the whole time, and believe me, they've known this the entire time, that that word is Yam Suf, and what Suf actually means is reeds. And when Christians and everybody started embracing the fact and making movies with people parting Red Seas and stuff all the way back to the Dark Ages, they propagated that idea. And then they didn't want you to have a Hebrew Bible, and then of course Hebrew is a lost language and gets a little suspicious in there. But all these old paintings have people going across the Reed Sea, God caused the Pharaoh to pursue the Israelites with chariots, and it overtakes them. And then when they see the Egyptian army, they're afraid. But the pillar of fire and cloud separates the Israelites and the Egyptians. Okay, well, we've already proved that this is only like 1/5 of the way there. And if they were headed out of there, 4 wide, in military style, going as close packed together as they can, that way more than half of them would still be in Egypt at this time. If he wanted to kill anybody, he'd just stop at the gate and just start killing people. People don't even think rationally whenever they think about objects and concepts like this. They're like, yeah, they all made it there and they're all standing on the beach. 2 million people standing on the beach. Where's this beach at? Well, they show you a little cute picture. I'll show you one here in a minute, but it's just... So, people find that this actual story, the narrative, they've already dug through this enough and all the old Septuagint and things, and they find that the narrative contains at least 3, possibly 4 layers. The first layer, the oldest, God blows the sea back with a strong wind, allows the Israelites to cross dry land. In the second, Moses stretches out his hand and the waters part in 2 walls. In the third, God clogs the chariot wheels of the Egyptians as they flee. In this version, the Egyptians do not even enter the water, by the way. They just clog in chariot wheels. And in the fourth, the Song of the Sea, God cast the Egyptians into Tiamat, the mythical abyss. So people have taken all 4 of these mythical events and tried to put them into one. Okay? And the rationale is that they went to Yam Suf. Right here, Yam Suf and Red Sea. So you can look up Yam Suf and you can look up Red Sea. When you look up Red Sea, they'll say Yam Suf. When you see Yam Suf, it'll tell you Reed Sea. Not Red Sea, Reed Sea. Sea of Reeds. And it's the place of the crossing, right? But, so, what's the reality out of all this? Well, that God cast the Egyptians into Tiamat with the Song of the Sea. The Song of the Sea is a Canaanite song about the god El, and how he had people oppressing him, and then a tidal wave knocked him out. Okay, and this is from antiquity. This goes back to I don't know, what they call the biblical flood time, but the real biblical flood we find must be way back before then, and that there are localized floods after that happen. There's a couple in Samaria that happen after that, a couple in here that happen, and quite easily it could be seen as something like the tsunami that ends up happening whenever in Japan, and just an offshore earthquake, boom, because there's lots of earthquakes back in this time. Volcanoes going off like crazy. Vesuvius is not far ahead, not far behind this was the one at the island of Crete and everything getting destroyed around there. There was another one that was going on at the time of the Trojan War and stuff, or recently to it. So there's, and I'm talking large volcanoes, something that, like Mount St. Helens kind of idea. It's the only thing we can relate to here in America and probably in recent times in this area at all. But things like that going on around them. And there's earthquakes going on like crazy. Of course, people are blaming the earthquakes on God up under the bottom of the earth because the Earth's just a flat thing and they're living on the bottom side and they're bouncing on the bottom of it and doing things and rumbling around, making Big Mad. And of course, when Big Mad happens, then we got to go in and flip the dice wearing the ephod and see what happens. Basically, the old Hebrew thing was they wore an ephod and they went into the special room, yada, 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 and then they would throw down a white and a black dice, and depending on how they landed, it meant what God wanted. So if there was ever a full moon or a solar eclipse or an earthquake going on or anything along that, it was God's will, and all of a sudden you had to do something about it. You flip a few coins, and who knows, you might go off and just cause genocide to an entire group of people. But in the coin toss, you might change it and decide to, keep the virgins or something like that. But anyhow, so Yom Suf. So we'll look here that, they journey from Ramses to Succoth, and then they go around and they talk all about it. And you can pause this real quick and look at it, but I just want to show you again that the place of the crossing is Yom Suf, although it's traditionally thought to refer to the saltwater inlet located between Africa and Arabian Peninsula, known in English as the Red Sea. This is a mistranslation from the Greek Septuagint. In Hebrew, Suf never means red, but reeds. While it's not relevant to the identification of the body of water we're trying to talk about, Suf also does pun in Hebrew, Sufa as storm, and Sof as being the end of things, or end. So, and it's odd that they would have Sof as the end, because Sophia is wisdom. And so this confusion of languages turns things that we know as Sophia, like philosophia, philosophy, is the love of knowledge. So it's basically based on philosophia. And so Soph in another language means end, and in the other one it means knowledge, and definitely not end. So isn't that odd? And so whenever you find in the Bible that we're supposed to come to that end, we're actually supposed to come to knowledge, by the way. Because, by the way, that's a Greek word. And of course, the oldest Bibles we find are the Greek Septuagint. And every old Bible seems to be messed with by the Greeks and Greek Gnostics. And people wonder why. And that's because the Greeks had their hand in it the whole time. And I won't prove that in this video. I can show you many others that are on my site. Take a look as this unravels. But one you might want to look at is Josephus, a Flavian liar. Or I'm about to do another one too that's along that same line. And it's about Vespasian the Wasp and his assaults. In fact, Vespasian is the wasp in the Bible that runs in front of him and chases away all the people, by the way. Vespasian, Vespa, means wasp. And so whenever it says that a wasp goes out in front of him, that's exactly what it means. It's a horror called Vespa. And what is that? That's Vespasian. The Vespasian part of it just puts him to be a deity. Just like when they put us on the end of anything, It's actually just putting a deity on it. People's names. Kronos, his name would be Kron. Saturnus, his name is Saturn. So anyhow, it's supposed to be this area that goes around. Well, people know that it's never really happened, right? And so, you can find that these guys did a computer simulation of how strong it would take to go the east wind, all kind of things, these different mentions through it and stuff. And you can look at this for, pause it and look at that for it. But what we're also going to do, I guess, here real quick before we end, is we're going to look at let's go back right here. Just look at picture Exodus, the Red Sea. So what we're picturing is something in this area here that seems to have, well, it seems to have locked up on me. There we go. No, we don't go. Okay, let's go back. So it looks like in the Red Sea, oh, you want to cancel for me, huh? We'll go all the way back here. Well, let's go to images. So here's the Red Sea, and so what we have is an image that looks like the Red Sea usually. Well, let's look at this that's a little bit more appropriate, even though it's a little fuzzy. They're coming out of here, and they didn't go all the way down here and then cut across. They just went straight down. through this whole area that's green right here with green words called the Sea of Reeds that used to flood out from this river that runs between it and cause a giant sea of reeds. That's where all the papyrus is made out. Clearly, it goes all the way from the word Goshen to the actual Red Sea itself. So this is where the Red Sea is. And we've always had this idea of this is how they go down in there, right? This is how they go down in there. They go down and they go across and the waters are parted. And it seems somewhat feasible in this picture, except for a couple of things. This gap is not here. There's not a smooth slope that runs down into the flat part, and the ocean would actually be 100 foot taller than this. So when I was a kid, I thought, maybe it was how the water sucks out during a big tidal wave. Of course, you think, if you're smart, after that, you think when the tidal wave comes back in, it would have killed them all. And it wouldn't have gone just one way, and they miraculously go, no, come on, people, have some sense here. So they say that they go through like this right here. That's a terrible image, but you can see them going through down here at the bottom, and this is not an accurate representation. If this person is, say, 5 foot tall, then this is only about 50 foot tall of an ocean, and the ocean there is 180 foot tall. So, perhaps a better interpretation would have been something like from the movie where they try to show you a tidal wave that they close-upped on, like this. But in reality, they try to tell everybody that where it actually happened was right here, okay? And they had come across there. And because that's got a good flat area, it's an open area, it's, it seems feasible that that's where they all came out and that they would have had a chance to actually get there. And people have found wagon wheels now, and they say, oh, well, somebody less than 100 years ago threw that wagon wheel out there. It had been so rotted and decayed, and coral would have grown over it to where you couldn't recognize it anymore in that area anyhow. Look at the coral growth patterns in that area. I used to do it for a living. So anyhow, it comes across as being something, damn near miraculous and impossible. In fact, the impossibility of it is that the sides of that go down 180 foot and they're jagged, and there's no way for you to walk down the sides of it, regardless of going across. If the water wasn't there, okay, even if the water wasn't there, and they're trying to say that you cross across from here, from this point right here to the flat, it is right down here. It's not, doesn't go down like they showed you that one picture I started here with, but it's jagged coral reefy stuff. It goes all the way down, and they found ships down there and everything, but they can't find any way that people could have made it across there. And so that you were left to believe, I know it's a terrible picture, but that, a million people can get out on this. A million people can get out on this. And then they go down in the water. Well, the problem is from right here straight down, it just dives, kind of going at an angle. But there's no way to crawl down that. It would take professional mountain climbers' equipment to be able to go down that side edge. And so that's easily explained by the fact that it's actually Yam Suf, and it's the Sea of Reeds. And the Sea of Reeds doesn't make it so exciting. And now, one of the most incredible things you think happened in the big woo actually didn't really happen. In fact, they just went through the Sea of Reeds, and then the guys in their chariots going after them bogged down, but them not being in chariots didn't get bogged down, or they got through it, and by then it became slightly a slurry, and perhaps even the water rose enough to where they couldn't get through. It's a great story, it really is, but they steal the idea. The Song of the Sea that's after that is actually directly stolen now. We have, damn near proof. Song of the Sea is stolen from the Canaanites. And that stuff from before, in fact, how much other is stolen by the Canaanites? Well, the Canaanites worshipped a god named El, just like El. And he was known as, from Rome and Greece, as the Satyrs, or Saturn himself. That's what they called him. And the people of the land that were around there were called Satyrs. They said they were a little bit less civilized than the Greeks and Romans, and so they still wore animal skins as pants and things like that. And that became a derogatory term when they kept having wars with them. Next thing you know, they've got like horns in their heads. And so uh, now they turned him into Pan and all those type of things, and that's Saturn and that's El. Well, they worshipped El because, well, first of all, Israel is actually the Phoenician word for the planet Saturn. That's a neat one. So another neat one is Moses actually had horns. If you want to take a look, there's thousands of old ancient depictions because in the Bible it says he has horns. In the modern day Bibles, they've tried to change it around and says rays of light coming out of his head, and that scared everybody. But reality is that whenever he came down off the mountain, that what he had was horns growing out of his head. That somehow after meeting this entity in the Bible, he had horns growing out of his head. It's exactly what it says, because Baal and Yahweh have horns. Yeah, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, has horns. I mean, here, let me. He also has a wife. Believe it or not, if I look up Yahweh and his Asherah, I don't even spell it right. I spelled Taweh and his Asherah. It actually still shows up these pictures of Yahweh and his Asherah, inscriptions on things they found now. Yahweh and his Asherah. Asherah were the Asherah poles that were the divinity and the wife, and they wanted to get rid of any symbolism they had because it made them look funny. Well, what makes them look funny? I don't know. Let's see what it looks like. It looks like two cows here, two cows with bulls, and it looks like there's flies going all around them. See this fly right here? Yeah, flies, and then Yahweh's Asherah. So they're bull gods. So they're bull gods, and all this Canaanite Baal worship that they used to do. I'll just hit one more quick information here real quick. What does Baal worship look like? Baal worship is the god. They had El and Baal and Moloch that they worship through there. I mean, you've heard about all that and stuff, right? Well, Moloch is looked at as being an owl figurine that they had, and it actually symbolizes Asherah and the woman. And then Moloch itself is really just somebody who's the Lord over you, a kingship. That's who Moloch is in the Bible, and they act like it's some big thing. It's just them worshiping somebody that's already got them under them. They always had people under them. They're living in somebody else's land. So Baal worship is when they used to feed their children to these statues. And sure enough, it tells you right in Scripture, their sons and their daughters they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. Well, then they quit calling it Canaan. But I tell you, it's just something weird. I mean, this is what they used to worship. This is it right here. Straight up. That's what they used to worship. And so what would you think nowadays if you saw that and you thought, there's somebody in the world that worships this? Okay, well, this is what they did up until the moment that they took out the statues and no more symbolism. So that's what Yahweh is right there. That's Yahweh Baal. They had a woman, Asherah and everything, took that all out of there too, made women, women grew from a rib, and they ate from a magic tree because the talking snake told her to. And so that's why women are hated. See, doesn't this all make sense now? Now that you realize that that's what they used to worship, and then they just took the sign off the door and left everything the same? Now do you kind of get an idea?